afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This is your host, Michael Cross, and I'm hoping that you'll find this topic that we're dealing with today stimulating and, well, interesting, especially when we're talking about the political races coming up. Well, we're already in them, actually, but the 2016 election. But I'm not going to really talk that much about politics. I'm going to talk more about psychology. In fact, what I'd like to do is ask people to maybe explore what is it that makes a psychopath? And who knows? Maybe we should see, are you one? Could you be one? Are you sort of one? I have a term that I like to use that is borderline psychopath. And that's kind of like you don't score high enough to be considered a psychopath in the traditional sense, or clinical sense, I should say, but you score way higher than the average person would. And I really do think that psychopathy is something that is on a range. It sort of looks similar to that whole bell curve, although it would look a lot different in the sense that you wouldn't have everything in the middle as being an average. Most of the time, I think when you give a test like this, you'll find about, over 80% of people will score somewhere around 0 to 5 on, one of these psychopathy tests that appear to be, based on the criteria that's pretty common out there about what a psychopath is. So if you take those tests, usually they're 20 questions. Don't worry, we'll get to that 20 question test in just a moment so you could test it to see if you are, or maybe your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, your ex, your boss, or maybe the person that you're thinking of voting for president. Could actually be a psychopath, or at least have a lot of those traits. But before I get there, I just want to say, first of all, that the tests are usually 20 questions, and they test pretty much your personality, although the last few questions deal mostly, without getting into a lot of psychological jargon, deal mostly with behavior. But the first part deal more with, their behavior, but also the way that you think. So, like I said, most people, the vast majority of people, if they take these kinds of tests, they score 0 to 5. And then there's a few that get into the 5 to 15. Then there's a small number that will score, like around 16 to 25 or 30, and that's what I'd kind of consider those borderline psychopaths. Again, not to be confused with borderline personality disorder. Borderline and psychopathy are somewhat connected, but not entirely. They are a different personality disorder, although there is a certain overlap that some psychologists believe might actually be misdiagnosis in regards to borderlines. Actually, many of the borderlines who predominantly are female might actually be psychopaths. In fact, in my first book, Freedom from Conscience, Melanie's Journey, the main character, the heroine, is actually a psychopath. But her female friend, Nicole, is, I tried to present more as a borderline. And so their relationship to one another is one of reinforcement, and also a sort of codependency, and so forth. You can find out more about these kinds of topics. I go into a lot more detail at my website, michaelcross.net. So just go there, and there's a whole bunch of articles that relate to how I try to place psychological facts into a fictional narrative so that it's better understood. And it's not just, some sort of clinical thing. So anyway, I've I've found a lot of tests out there, but most of them are the valid ones, not those ones you find in social media that ask really silly questions like what football team do you support or something like that, which has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with psychopaths or anything person when it comes to psychology, as far as I can see. But what they generally do is they go by those 20 questions that have been out there, that maybe Robert Hare deals with these kinds of criteria, and Checkley in his research in the 50s. So they tend to kind of cluster around general themes. Now, there's one test that's pretty popular out there, at least on, the internet if you look it up. And it's just basically, you could type it in and just test for psychopathy. And I've seen it on a lot of alternative media. But the first place I found it was at a website that, well, it's not really a psychological website, it's more political, but they have a test for psychopathy. And it's at a website called arkanside.com. And if you just Google arkanside.com, and then psychopathic test, it'll take you there. And it has a little thing that will score you and so forth. And so, why don't we just go ahead and take the test? And I'm going to read off the general description or the general criteria. And if this fits, whether it be yourself, someone you know, or your favorite or your least favorite politician, then if it's something that just really fits, you put a 2 down. You just write a 2. If it sort of fits, you write a 1. And if it's just something that's very rare, if any kind of fit whatsoever, put a 0. Now, again, this is not a scientific diagnosis, okay? Don't score high or low or whatever and feel like this has basically determined what you are. The old disclaimer, you should go, if you really feel like you want a diagnosis, then go to a mental health professional and see if they'll give you the test in that way. But ultimately, this is just to kind of give people a clue as to what a psychopath really thinks. And it's kind of a fun way of doing it, because lots of people like to take tests. But anyway, if you want, just go to that website at arkanside.com and, also search for psychopathic test. So anyway, what are the criteria? Well, I've stated this in a lot of my shows. If you want, you can, I've done a lot of interviews with people who are actually diagnosed psychopaths, and also psychologists that deal with the whole issue of psychopaths. And you can go to my website, my YouTube site, I should say, at michaelcross. That's my written stuff at michaelcross.net. Just type in YouTube Michael Cross, and it's the one that will come up with Freedom from Conscience. Since there's more than just one Michael Cross on YouTube. And you can watch some of those discussions that I've had with some pretty famous psychopaths out there. Anyway, the first criteria would be, and remember, it's a 2 if that's you, a 1 if it kind of applies, and a 0 if not that much, if ever. Okay, glib and superficial charm. Let's just say you're the life of the party, and you can turn it on or you can turn it off depending on the situation. Now, again, I'm not reading this directly from the page. You're able to just present yourself in a way that you can sell sand in Saudi Arabia to people. You're able to basically present yourself and move an audience at will. And that audience can be one person, it can be 50, it could be 50,000. But ultimately, when someone's, gives you a task like, can you sell this idea to that person? You are able to do it. And, it's just a natural talent. So it's glib and superficial charm. You might not really mean it, but you're going to say it anyway. Okay. So if you've scored, a 2, that's like, whoa, that's me, or that's my boss, or that's such and such congressman. Then, that's a 2, 1 if it's sometimes, and 0 not that often. The second one, number 2, grandiose self-worth. Now, that's one in which the person is, well, some people would say arrogant. They find themselves to be superior. They tend to look upon themselves as just basically being they're in a class of their own. And, that clicked off a little bit there. Anyway, it's basically a kind of a grossly inflated views of your abilities or your self-worth. Now, that can usually mean that you're very selfish. Now, having a little Skype problems there. Now, that can mean that you're very self-assured, but a lot of times it could come across as being somewhat arrogant, that you are the center of the universe, so to speak. Again, grandiose self-worth. You've got it can also mean, too, that you've got this feeling that there is this destiny that awaits you. I know there's a lot of politicians who have, if you look at their writings, they'll say ever since maybe being 8 or 9 years old, they wanted to be a senator or a president, while their friends were saying, I want to be a fireman or something like that. They wanted power early on. Okay, number 3, a need for stimulation or proneness to boredom. So, in other words, that can translate out to such things as doing things that are different, novel, different approach to things, doing things that, and there's an explanation for this in regards to hormones like serotonin and so forth. But ultimately, it's that you need a little bit more kick out of life than the average person would. The average person could go and see something, do something, experience something, and they're like, wow, that was so special. A psychopathic person might be more prone to like, what was so special about that? I want something different. Okay, so they tend to be a little bit restless. They don't want to just sit around, and spend hours contemplating something. They want to be doing something different. They don't want to be just doing dull or routine things. They don't like to do tedious work. They can be very creative, but at the same time, they don't want to be the ones that actually put everything together, for the final project. Now, 4, a tendency to lie. Okay? Now, when I say lying, I don't necessarily mean that you just say something that's not true. Just a flat-out lie. Or it could be a flat-out lie. But it can also mean people that are very able to twist words and use them, kind of the half-truth thing, I did not have sex with that woman, type of thing. And in a legal sense, you could say, well, no lie has been told. Even though in when people are saying, well, wait a minute, this is not true, when you look at it under cross-examination. But the thing is that psychopaths are very good at being able to present something in such a way that it could be true on paper even. I would say that probably the more intelligent psychopaths are the ones that are masters of manipulation when it comes to that sort of thing, versus the less intelligent ones, which, or maybe when they're really, really young, little kids, they're going to be more likely to say things that you can look at and go, wait a minute, that's just not true. How do you, what, you take me for an idiot? Okay. So, generally, I mean, everyone lies, and lots of people do it all the time, but psychopaths have a certain flair about it. And, maybe that's why there's a lot of psychopaths in journalism as well as in politics. Anyway, number 5, cunning and manipulativeness. And basically that's the ability to cheat and to be able to get away with it without feeling any kind of remorse or anything. Now, when I say that, again, I'm not saying this as in, you're out there cheating people out of their life savings, although many psychopaths do that sort of thing. But it could be that you're able to work your way around a situation and advance yourself. If you want something, you're going to get it. And you're very clever. Basically, you're the kind of person who the conspiracy theory is talked about. Okay? Because you know how to set up conspiracies. You know how to set a goal and implement it, even if that goal may not be so really, I'm not going to say worthwhile. It may be a really worthwhile goal. But basically, you'll do what it takes to actually get it done. And if that means that you're going to be a little ruthless about it and cunning, then so be it. This may be why there's a lot of psychopaths in marketing. Okay? It doesn't mean that you're necessarily lying, and it doesn't mean you're using deceit. If you're marketing to children, and you've studied what colors and so forth appeal to kids, and what textures appeal to 8-year-olds, and what kinds of things really get them excited. And so you make a commercial that employs all of those things for a toy that the kid may play with, for 5 minutes after Christmas, after opening their Christmas presents, but then get very bored with because, in the commercial it seems so exciting. Well, that fits into cunning and manipulativeness, okay? It's not necessarily that you're lying and being deceitful and taking people's life savings. It can actually mean that you're just very good at getting people to do what you want them to do. And then leads into number 6, lack of remorse or guilt. And the thing there is basically it doesn't bother you. If you're a salesman and you sell something, if you get some guy that you're kind of getting the idea that, maybe he's worried about his appeal to women. Let's say he's a little short guy and, a little dumpy and everything, and he comes on the car lot, and you're able to sell him this really expensive but big muscle car, and that his finances are kind of weak, but he'd be able to pull it off. But you want to sell him that rather than the little sedan that's, will get him to work and stuff like that. You want to sell him the more expensive thing. Or you're a saleswoman in a store, and guy comes in, a little nerdy, and so now let's not make it guys all the time. The saleswoman and a woman comes in, and you can kind of catch the feel that she's a little unsure of herself. And you find out she's got this big party coming up, and she's all worried about it. And, you're working on commission. You're just like the car salesman in many cases. You're working on commission. And so you get her to buy a dress that is really out of her price range, but basically she's, basically having to go home real quick and break her piggy bank and come back with the remainder of the money and buy it. And, you package it, give it to her. And when she's gone, you're like, yeah, okay, no biggie. It was her choice. I didn't, you may have used, of course, your, skills at salesmanship, but you can still tell yourself that was her choice. Very good, next kind of thing. So that's kind of manipulative. And then, of course, the lack of remorse or guilt. It's, of course, cunning, but we're dealing with lack of remorse or guilt. So if number 6 is you or your friend, put a 2. If it's somewhat you, a 1. And if it's never or just sometimes, it's 0. Then shallow affect. Now, this is something where it's quite interesting about psychopathic people because they can they can appear almost like they don't feel emotion at all. They could be like a Mr. Spock. Okay? Kind of a sense I've always wondered if the character Mr. Spock is a psychopath or if he's Asperger. I think he's more Asperger. But someone that really, you say something to them and they're kind of like, okay. And it's something really, really either exciting or tragic. And it doesn't seem to really affect them that much, or some sort of really gut-wrenching thing on TV that you're watching together, and he or she is just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, that sort of thing. But at the same time, they're able, if they have to show a certain level of remorse. They go to a mutual friend's funeral, and they're shaking people's hands, hugging, acting really, really like this is the worst thing that ever happened to them. And then the funeral's over, and they're kind of like, hey, let's go see the new such and such movie. And they're like, nothing happened. Okay, that is kind of that shallow affect thing, and what they call here emotional poverty. Kind of cold, and sometimes tactless, because ultimately you kind of like, you don't really take in all of the emotional depth of the situation. Now, there's one here, a parasitic lifestyle, which means basically that the person has a lack of motivation, a low level of discipline. They say here, an inability to begin or complete responsibilities. Now, this one I would argue with, but I will point out, I want to go into a little detail here. Psychopaths can often be people that have a very major goal, as I said, with grandiose self-worth. They may have unrealistic goals and so forth. But, and we'll get to that. But the thing is that they will tend to delegate responsibilities to people. And when it comes to politics, many of them that do make it, they want the goal, they'll do everything they can, and they can be great in front of an audience, but they need people on the campaign staff to kind of keep them out of trouble. Okay? If it's some, male politician, you're kind of like, okay, that young woman that's shaking hands with him right now after the speech, make sure that you keep those two separate from one another. Okay? Because they're often their own worst enemy in those kinds of situations. So, yeah, but again, ultimately, a lot of times it's a situation where they might have relationships that are codependent. They need the other person to kind of keep them in line to reach their goals. Okay, whether that's a business relationship or a romantic, and of course, in a business situation, and so forth. We're talking about the ones that, are very ambitious. There are psychopaths that are not very ambitious, and they're perfectly willing to marry someone for their money, or they're willing to find a way to fake an injury or something like that. So, but again, it's still this kind of a manipulative way to exploit a financial dependence. And poor behavioral controls, number 10. And this can mean that a person acts rashly, They don't think through the consequences. They'll jump. This is sometimes why they do well, though, in business, because maybe there's a business deal that no one dares take on. They're like, oh my gosh, I will totally fail at this, and the boss will hate me, and all this kind of stuff. So the boss throws this almost suicidal mission out for his employees to accomplish something. The psychopath is often quite quick to raise their hand, going, I'll do it, and jump it right in there. And when they are successful, that shoots them up the corporate, ladder, so to speak. Okay. And that is one of the things. They will do things that are somewhat, poor behavioral control. Now that can be one of the reasons why there's also a connection. And we dealt with that in one of my interviews, that often psychopaths tend to do heroic things. They'll do things that other people would go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not going to put myself in that situation. Or I've got a family, or I've got a reputation to protect, or I've got this or this or this. And why doesn't someone else do something? The psychopath often will jump right in and do it, without thinking. And so then the fact that they tend not to connect with social norms, that those kinds of things don't really mean that much to them, because those are artificially created by, society. So therefore they often it's been found that heroic people, the people that do the things that, like, you're wondering, how in the heck did they manage to step forward and do that? They tend to score higher on psychopath test. Okay. But ultimately it can be for some those really crazy things like seducing your boss's wife, or doing things like driving carelessly to try to impress people, or any number of things, okay, that are negative. But sometimes in our society, they're positive too. So it's a double-sided coin there. But anyway, poor behavior controls. Then we get into promiscuous sexual behavior. Now, I think this is true to a large degree. Now, again, I'm going to make a reference to my first book, in which the main heroine is actually a virgin. She is very, very selective, though. She feels herself a certain arrogancy, which you've already talked about, in which she is not going to just go and be with some guy because it's, that's what to do. She wants it to be someone who's her equal. And so some psychopaths are not sexually promiscuous. Now, of course, as the books go on, that there's a redefining when it comes to what she sees as promiscuous. And, of course, psychopaths will do that. They can justify having a mistress or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever on the side, and it not bother them. They can make justifications for it. But I think that this is something that I've had questions about whether this should even be on a test like this. But ultimately, I think most psychopaths tend to be a bit towards the promiscuous side because they have all these other skills of charm and so forth, and maybe poor impulse control, and therefore they do find themselves doing things like this, even though there are many who are very under control, whether that be because of their religion or because they don't want to disrupt their family life. Then they can be very monogamous in that sense. Or, polyamorous or polygamous or whatever, depending on how they want to define their life. Anyway, but yeah, a 2 on promiscuous. Again, it's or 1 if sometimes, and 0 if that's not me. But the thing is that I think this is a societal thing too. I mean, if someone's strongly religious and there may be some people that say, well, if a person's lusting after other people or looking at porn or something like that, then that means they're promiscuous. Whereas if you're non-religious, you're going to be kind of like, yeah, whatever. So this is, I think, conditional to a certain degree to the society that you're talking about. Okay, early behavioral control problems. And that can mean, lying, getting in trouble, theft, vandalism, being a bully, any number of things that, always being a total misery to your parents, no matter what. Okay. And this can, this early behavior problem, not wanting anyone to tell you what to do, essentially. And it could be criminal or it could be non-criminal. Okay. 13, lack of realistic long-term goals. Essentially, it's you either set too high of goals or too low of goals. And again, I think this is dependent upon other factors as well. Like I said, there are some psychopaths that actually do set goals and are like sharks, looking for a piece of raw meat when it comes to achieving that goal. Okay, but they still have a hard time actually focusing and getting the goal because, of course, with all goals, there's tedious work involved. Impulsive, number 14. And again, that deals with the whole idea of a lack of planning or a bit inability to resist temptation and not really calculating the cost and the benefits of a behavior. Okay, so impulsivity would be 14. 15 is irresponsible. This can mean, not paying bills, not getting out there and getting a job when you know you need to, not honoring a contract, you're often late to work, or you get other people to do your work for you, or you're basically someone that just, there's those kinds of people that just get away with things a lot, if you're a successful psychopath. But, an irresponsibility, forgetting to pay the bills, and all of a sudden the creditors are coming out after you. Not because you were necessarily avoiding it, but it just wasn't important to you. Anyway, failure to accept responsibility for your own actions, number 16. So it's not your fault. Someone else did it. It's kind of like that old Bart Simpson's, I didn't do it. It's so ultimately you find some way of saying, without any guilty conscience whatsoever, he did it, she did it, it's their fault, it's not me, it's society's fault, it's the vast right-wing conspiracy, I don't know, but it's someone else's fault. And let's see, 17, many short-term marital relationships. This is, again, a general thing. This is the average, because a lot of people just find that they cannot accept the behavior that a psychopath might have. So therefore, relationships break up. But then again, there can also be what I would consider a psychopathic determination to maintain a relationship. And in those cases, you could have even two psychopaths, and it's rare, but it does happen, where two psychopaths actually meet and are able to have a very long-term relationship with one another. Okay, I think there may be, well, I'm not going to give examples, but anyway, there's probably famous people that both the husband and wife are psychopathic, but they're able to maintain their marriage and relationship and so forth. But most of the time it's relationship to relationship to relationship. And I've also heard the thing about the, be aware that with these kinds of people, they're always saying, oh yeah, my last marriage broke up because my husband was this, or my wife was that, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. They're always really quick to say, they were perfect and everyone else was terrible. Juvenile delinquency for 18. And that deals with such things as all of these things I've talked about. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you wind up in jail. Maybe you got away with a lot of stuff. Maybe there's things you did that you're going, oh my gosh, if they would have caught me for that. But juvenile delay, and it's a pattern. It's not just, oops, that one time I spray painted the barn or something like that. It's not that kind of thing. It's just kind of this idea that a lot of young people have is, if I can get away with it, I'm going to do it. So, that's juvenile delinquency there. And, of course, if you get in trouble, number 19, that would be revocation of conditional release. So, you get caught, and then the police, the judge says, well, if you do this, you're going to be in even bigger trouble. 3 strikes, you're out type thing. But, you strike out once, then you strike out twice, and then number 3. So often the person is still, they're not like controlling themselves. They just go out and do it again. They cannot help themselves. And 20, criminal versatility. That means, I think it was a George Carlin comedy skit he did one time where he was just like, if you're a serial killer, don't do the same thing over and over again. One victim, make sure they're, you use a gun. The next one, you strangle them. The next one, you drown them. The next one, you don't want to set a pattern that the police are going to be able to look for you and actually find you. Okay, so ultimately, that's that kind of criminal versatility. I've heard some people claim that famous directors and writers and stuff, the fact that they're able to even envision these scenes of criminal versatility might be a indication of looking in on their own souls. I'm not sure about that. I would rather, I don't know. I don't think Alfred Hitchcock's up for any kind of psychological diagnosis right now. But versatility means that a person can think along different routes and do different things. It's a pattern. It's not that, oh, you're a thief or you're a kleptomaniac, but you also are doing this and this and this and this and this. So anyway, score yourself a 2 if that's you, a 1 if it's sometimes, a 0 if it's never. Ultimately, I think the value of these kinds of diagnosis is that they allow people to they allow people to be able to get a insight into exactly what a psychopath is, and other kinds of diagnosis as well. And also what I think is most important is what a psychopath isn't. Now, I'm sure the vast majority of people that followed along with this and took the test scored really low, and, so if those times where their boyfriend or girlfriend, wife or husband has said, you're a psychopath, and, they're like, what? It's turned into an insult, and it's actually a diagnosis, okay? It's an actual psychological condition. But in our society, we don't usually, someone says something unusual and we say, you're a schizophrenic, or you're bipolar, or, any number of other things. When it comes to psychopaths, though, that has been associated with with insults and being able to say, well, you're just this horrible person. It's like Hannibal Lecter or something like that. So if you scored low, which most of you will have, then, don't worry about it. But now if you're taking a look and maybe you're going, wow, this one person running for president, or I was watching the debates, whether they be the Republicans or Democrats, and wow, they just seem to be all of them. Maybe you say all of them, or at least a lot of them, or maybe just the key ones. I don't know. But you can look at those people and you're just like, that this whole thing we've gone over here, there, they got like a 25 or a 30 or even higher on this. Of course, that's our own biased judgment and our own selective bias. We're going to look at the people we like and go, hey, they did this. And, if they ate a puppy, it was just like, oh, well, they were hungry, versus if it's a bad guy, it's like, yeah, a cruel, horrible person, and that sort of thing. But still, this does give us some insights and gives us an ability to be able to see what the condition's all about. And again, I'm not even demonizing most psychopaths. There are many of them that are actually ethical people, but they just think differently. Okay? They think differently. And so in that sense, they may do the right thing, but sometimes it might not be for the reason you think they should be doing it. But then that gets us into a philosophical question. Do we really have the right to sit there and start going, well, if you do something, it's like a biblical thing. It's like a religion, if you do the right thing because you feel it, helping your neighbor who's starving, out of work and stuff, they don't have any money for food, and you give them food because you want to help them. Okay, again, Skype problem. Anyway, but you're helping them because you want to do what's right, in your heart. Some people would say that might be different than if someone else does it because their religion, they feel like they're getting, points for helping their neighbor. Ultimately, if you're the neighbor, you don't care. Okay? If you have the best surgeon in the world and he or she cuts into you and they save your life, are you really worried that they did it because they really cared for you or because they want to maintain their reputation as the best surgeon by saving your life no matter at any cost? Okay? So that gets us philosophical. But anyway, it is something we need to consider. And really when you're studying politics nowadays or a lot of different facets of life, whether they're romantic or whether they are business or whatever, knowing something about psychopathy is probably a pretty good idea. But please don't start diagnosing everyone, every single person around you, unless, of course, you're a member of Congress, as being a psychopath. Anyway, I always, or at least recently, been starting my show with making that slight plug, check my website at michaelcross.net or my YouTube station at Michael Cross. That's where I keep most of the interviews and discussions from the show once I convert them to YouTube. And there is obviously the point of trying to get people to look at more articles and more information. But this brings me to the point of the show tonight, and that is this. I think that, especially with the presidential elections coming, conservatives are at a disadvantage. And what conservative, I mean traditionalists, people that look to the Constitution, people that believe in traditional families and those kinds of values, okay? There's a disadvantage because many of them think of politics as something that they know who they want to vote for, they know what their values are, and it's kind of the whole God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Of course, I know atheists who are very conservative too. I just wanted to say it that way. Now, the thing is this. I think that the liberal side, they grow up and they're looking around and they're thinking of themselves as having an ideology that if just everyone was a little bit more educated, they would accept. And, so they sort of have a sort of arrogance, but at the same time, they have more of a missionary zeal. When you believe that if people were just exposed to the truth, and then they would accept it, then you're going to do your darndest to find more and creative ways to get your information out. And unfortunately for conservatives, the left tends to dominate when it comes to social media, when it comes to getting information out in interesting ways. I know there are some very big sites out there, but there's all that are conservative, but there's also a lot that's liberal and a lot that we don't even consider in the political realm. I would throw in sites like Tumblr, which have many, many blogs. They're a special type of blog. There's some conservative, but a lot of liberal there, and that's a place where a lot of younger women hang out. And so the thing is that I think that more conservative, traditional people need to learn a little bit from the 2008 Obama campaign, because that was the first election won through social media. YouTube, especially, but also Facebook and other social media sites, because they understood, hey, here's some ways to get information out to a lot of people, a very diverse group, and it's not that you're really paying that much for it. It goes out there, and it's there as long as you leave the site up. So you might put a YouTube video out there of Obama giving a speech, and maybe the first few days gets a lot of views, but then it goes down, and because subscribers and so forth are watching it. But then it goes down, but it never goes to zero. So every day there's a few people tuning in. And if you had 12 or 13 people there filming it, well, that's 12 or 13 videos. Think of this, those of you that are, really into Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. I've seen these rallies. Trump, of course, gets these massive rallies, but Cruz also brings them in. What if you had 100 people at a typical rally with their video cameras up, with YouTube stations, and they were filming one of the candidates giving a really good speech, and they just take maybe the 20 minutes that's the absolute best, and they put it on YouTube. Think about this. Now, let's just pretend only an average of 10 people see it. Now, you put something on YouTube, it should get more than that. But let's pretend that your 100 people that, let's say, go to the Donald Trump rally, 100 people, they put their videos up, and 10 people see it. Okay? That's 1,000 people now that have seen it. Now, the thing is, it's going to be more than that. Some people will get maybe 10, but some will also get a lot more. And if every single rally that Donald Trump gave, you had a bunch of people out there filming it and putting the best part on YouTube, pretty soon, whenever you would go to YouTube, it wouldn't be dominated. If you type in Trump, it wouldn't be dominated by the left jumping on him. Okay? It would actually be dominated by that grassroots supporters playing stuff and sharing it with people. That's what Obama did. He totally dominated John McCain. And then later, I thought, well, Mitt Romney would learn. He didn't, okay? He really didn't learn that much. And again, Obama dominated him. So ultimately, I think that we really need to double our not double, triple, or quadruple. I mean, go way out. Everyone listening to this, okay, should strive to reach out, become the new media. This is the new media age. Okay? This is what the elite are scared of. They are dang scared that all of a sudden the gatekeepers, the corporate media, are going to lose control of the information. And if they lose control of the information, they lose control of people's minds. Okay? Because information persuades. You might think, oh, I argue with people all the time and it doesn't do anything. Oh, yes, it does. It causes most people to start at least reevaluating something about their initial viewpoint. Just something. Now, I'm not going to really deal that much with Facebook, but I will say this. There's Facebook and there's some other social media similar to Facebook that when you put posts up there, now I know there's like a filtering thing that goes on and you got 1,000 friends and only a small number will see, political posts and so forth. Okay. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. I just know that I have sites that I administer on Facebook, and it'll say, it may have 300 people that are members, and it'll say, well, 30 people reached on the average when I put something on there. And so I suspect there's something that, the people that you have the most contact with, you see what they say the most and so forth. But I will say this. It is a way to reach a few people. Okay? And you never know what mind you're going to influence and change. Okay? Just think if Bernie Sanders had been exposed to a little bit more conservative thought when he was younger. Think about the change that would have been. What if Hillary, when in the 60s, when she, when she originally started out as a Barry Goldwater Republican, but then she wound up getting a lot of exposure to liberal thought during the 60s, and she switched over. You could change people's minds. And you should not discount and think, well, that person's, it's not worth my time to try reaching out to people. Oh, yes, it is. Because you need to sway people on issues like gun control, where the media is like, whoa, guns are bad. You need to show the reasons why the media is wrong. You can't expect people just to be able to think, oh, no, I don't believe that. Because there's people of all types of persuasions out there, and you need to reinforce the ones that agree with you, and you need to get the others to think. So what would I suggest you do? Well, first of all, what I would do, if I were you, is like I said, I would get set up a YouTube station, and then I would start doing videos. And those could be videos where you film yourself. You might think, well, who wants to sit there and look at me, saying something. Well, I've seen some videos out there with a guy sitting there with a cowboy hat and talking about politics just in his car, with the camera there. Maybe his wife doesn't want him talking politics in the house. I don't know. But he's in the car, cowboy hat, he's talking, and he gives his opinion on something, and he's got 40,000 views. Okay? 40,000 people tuned into maybe the 10-minute talk he gave. That would fill a stadium. All right? I mean, I go through analytics. I know some of the people click on, click off, and there's a lot of people that do, though, listen to a good portion, if not all of your video. So think about that for a moment, the reach you can have. And you get to determine what issue is important to you, not the media. The media often ignores issues. If you set up your own little independent media on your own, there may be some issues that you never see discussed in the media. You can discuss those issues because it's you deciding to do the filming and putting it on to the net. Okay? Or you could just have something like what I do at my stuff. I don't have really, I don't have all the technical know-how and all that kind of stuff. So mine are usually audio. I generally take my own pictures for YouTube station. I'm just worried that, you use copyrighted pictures out there. And eventually one of these trade bills, if it gets passed, they're going to start going after anything that's on the internet that you don't have a copyright for. So I play it safe. I do a lot of my own photography. And sometimes I've seen some very, famous alternative media people who they just put a picture of a river or a mountain, and then they discuss something for 30 or 40 minutes. Okay, so that's all you sometimes have to do. I was going to talk about psychopathy in politics. That was the last show, actually, politics and people around you. The picture I have a picture I took of a snake that was on my wood pile during the summer of last summer. And so, it gets the point across, and at the same time, it's, I like photography. But you could do whatever you want to and still reach lots and lots and lots of people. Plus filming events, whether that be, like I said, some sort of gun thing. Interview people as long as they give permission for, you say, well, I'm going to put this on YouTube, and they say, yeah, sure, fine. Then it's, legal, and, put it out there and, get some messages across, about, like I said, guns or trade or immigration or abortion or alternative media or whatever, anything. Now, I'd also suggest making a blog. They're easy to do. I mean, you can find a lot of free blog sites out there. Now, here's the thing, though. My blog site, michaelcross.net, I haven't finished, but I decided to create a mirror site where I at least have the stuff saved in case something would happen and my website would crash. I'd still have my articles. And, I put the stuff up, and I noticed that when you just put a blog up, you usually don't get that many views. You can share it on Facebook. Every article you do, share it on Facebook. That gets a few views. Mention it in your video. If you're doing something, again, on guns, then go ahead and, you do a video on guns, and then you do an just a short commentary on guns and put that on your blog and let people know where your blog is on your video. And then you have a reinforcement, and it grows. And the more your video grows, the more people see it, the more they click on, the more visitors come to your website, which means, it reinforces itself. Now, here's my other big suggestion. Keep it simple. I've seen so many blogs where someone's so excited about an issue, New World Order or something like that. And you know what they do? They write something that's probably like 5,000 words. You click that on, 5,000 words, you click it right off. It's too long. Most people don't want to sit there and read. We click a lot, okay? Internet's no different than having a remote control on a Saturday afternoon when there's nothing else to do. Okay, click, click, click. You got to do it short. Be concise. Take one issue and explain your take on that issue. Put it on there. And then what you can actually do when it comes to like Facebook and other social media is you, instead of writing a sentence or two, liking a post or hating a post, you can still do the sentence or two, but put a link to your blog in as reinforcement, because you've created your own media, and therefore someone can go to that and they can read that and share it or whatever. I usually only post links to my own stuff on threads in social media that I'm in agreement with. Okay, otherwise people are like, you're spamming and that sort of thing. And I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't just put a link and then just leave it. I'll actually explain and then put a link. So it's just part of the explanation. Otherwise, people could think that you're just promoting yourself and putting spam up, when actually what you're trying to do is leaving people an avenue by which they can see more information about what you're trying to convey. And if it's short, because people, when they're on social media, they don't want, suddenly go from casually having a few minutes to spare to suddenly, I need to make 30 minutes to read this 5,000 word article. They don't like that. Okay? So make it short. Make it maybe only the length of a little bit longer than a letter to the editor, 250, 300 words. And have it dealing with a specific area of a topic that you feel people don't really understand. Your videos, make them short as well. 10 minutes is a good goal. My radio show makes it to where I have to go longer than 10 if I want to put everything on. But 10 minutes is a good goal. So if you're doing that right now, start now. Get the word out to people. I mean, you don't want a situation where all of a sudden you are having to, turn on President Hillary. Okay? Do you want that? I mean, if you do, that's fine. But if you don't, maybe you better get on the internet and start working now. Anyway, that's all for our show, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCYTV Productions.
Skateboard and listen on UCY.tv.